Good evening, everyone. The journey begins with how libraries change lives. And I think the Interprep Free Library is a library that's a testament to that. When I came to Pratt in 2000 to head the African American department, part of my charge was to make this the premier African American department in the country. And we started out with about 13,000, maybe 20,000 books in the collection. And I had to turn it into an actual functioning department, meaning that it had to function like social science and history and BST. So around 2014, I get summoned to Dr. Hayden's office. And my first thought was, what did I do now? And she came and she said, Vivian, I have a proposition I want to talk to you about. And I was like, okay. And she said, I've been in conversation with DeWayne Wickham, and what do you think about having the collection here at the Pratt Library? And I said, I think that's an excellent idea, because for the Pratt Library has always been a library, the People's University. And I thought that while we wanted to build more African American voices in this collection, that would be ideal. So in 2014, the conversation between her and Wickham began. And in 2016, he started bringing some of his collection. We were in conversations. I went out to Morgan, my alma mater, and we talked about his collection and what he wanted to see for this collection. And throughout the years, then COVID hit, and so everything was put on pause. And coming back after COVID, trying to restart and get that collection up and running, because we made him a promise that we would get it up. I did not want him to take it back, and so I worked diligently to get this collection up and running. And tonight is a testament to all the hard work that was done. I can't take credit for everything because it's a team effort, but I would like to shout out a couple of people, some of the departments that helped, including facilities, AV, SLRC, IT, the marketing team. Special shout out to institutional development, and particularly a special shout out to Carol Landis, who helped pull off this reception tonight, and I think she did a fantastic job. Geneve Purchase, my colleague in crime. Geneve did not know anything about the collection until it went under special collection, and so I kind of like roped her in and said, so she'll probably tell you I'm a taskmaster. However, I think when you see the collection tonight, you will be very, very pleased at how we pulled this off and how honored we are to have DeWayne Wickham's collection here. I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you, Dr. Hayden, for having the vision to get this collection here, and all of the other previous directors who played a part to help getting things done. And here we are tonight. So my time is up. I want to say thank you all for coming out and seeing this wonderful collection, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope to see some of you back here to enjoy this collection. So thank you.
Thank you, Vivian. Dean Jackie Jones is the Dean of the School of Global Journalism and Communication at Morgan State University. A veteran newswoman, Dean Jones has worked in a variety of capacities in newsrooms across the country, including the Baltimore Evening Sun, the Detroit Free Press, New York Newsday, the Philadelphia Daily News, the Milwaukee Journal Centennial, and the Washington Post. While at New York Newsday, she was a member of the newsroom team that won a Pulitzer Prize in 1992 for spot news coverage. She is the Dean of the School of Global Journalism and Communication at the Jewel of Baltimore City, Morgan State University. I introduce Dean Jackie Jones.
I see Dr. Moon is in the house this evening. Thank you. I am probably one of the few, if not the only dean to have her own hype man. Welcome, everybody. This is a wonderful evening, and I want to get to the good stuff, so I'm going to try not to take up too much of your time, but I do want to mention a couple of things before we start. You are going to see a film today called Banning Black Books, Silencing Black Voices, America's Apartheid. It couldn't have come at a better time. We see the evidence around us of attempts to erase our history, to change history, to diminish the value of history, of the hard work of people of this country, the striving of generations of people who lifted us up. We always like to say that we are the result of the wildest dreams of our foreparents. And yet we stand here at a time in this nation's history when all of that would be considered make-believe if we let some folks have their way. And so this film came about following a symposium in Havana, Cuba, where we had a discussion with some scholars and artists and journalists and public officials about what we could do together to have an impact and to talk about our shared experiences, our shared histories, as a matter of fact. And so we came up with the idea of having a 3-day symposium to talk about these issues and to bring in writers like Nicole Hannah-Jones, to bring in writers like our own Michael Kottman, who serves as the assistant to the dean in the School of Global Journalism and Communication, and talk about the things that have happened to them, to talk about work in the US and throughout the diaspora. Morgan also has an MOU with the University of Havana, and the School of Global Journalism and Communication has worked on several projects with the students and faculty of that school, so that was part and parcel of our trip. We got back, and Dean Emeritus Wickham immediately went to work inviting writers and scholars to participate in the symposium. And then while we were there, the rector or president of the university asked Dean Emeritus if he would turn it into a documentary that they would screen in Havana and that could be shared elsewhere. And so in a few short months, DeWayne was able to turn this thing around. If you ever worked for DeWayne Wickham, you would know that A, there is no such phrase as no can do, that anything can be done in any period of time, and even as we watched the weather and the infrastructure problems that Cuba was having and wondering whether we even were thinking clearly to decide to go and take a couple of students with us and pursue this, at one point I thought, he's the most metaphysical man I know. Once he puts his vision in play, things just come together. And I said, I'm not going to worry, I'm not going to doubt, we're just going to follow directions and go. And I think what you will see this evening will make you believe in his vision as well. So welcome, I hope you have a great evening, and thank you for coming.
Hello, I'm David K. Wilson, president of Morgan State University. In 1857, Samuel Green, a former slave, was sentenced to 10 years in a Maryland penitentiary after being found guilty of possessing a book. That was his only crime. While looking for a runaway slave, the local sheriff found a copy of Harriet Beecher Stowe's book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, in Green's. Hello, I'm David K. Wilson, president of Morgan State University. In 1857, Samuel Green, a former slave, was sentenced to 10 years in a Maryland penitentiary after being found guilty of possessing a book. That was his only crime. While looking for a runaway slave, the local sheriff found a copy of Harriet Beecher Stowe's book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, in Green's home. 5 years into his sentence, Green was pardoned by Maryland. Hello, I'm David K. Wilson, president of Morgan State University. In 1857, Samuel Green, a former slave, was sentenced to 10 years in a Maryland penitentiary after being found guilty of possessing a book. That was his only crime. While looking for a runaway slave, the local sheriff found a copy of Harriet Beecher Stowe's book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, in Green's home. 5 years into his sentence, Green was pardoned by Maryland's governor on the condition that he leave the state and never return. Green left, but when the Civil War ended, he came back to Maryland and along with 4 other clergymen founded the Centennial Biblical Institute, the forerunner of Morgan State University. Book banning, as Dr. Molefi Kite Asante says in the film you are about to watch, is tantamount to book burning. And at Morgan State University, we believe people should be encouraged to read books, and we believe the decision on which books they read should be left up to them.
The banning of books is related to the burning of books.
Book banning tells us what people who have power are afraid of.
I was never attacked until I argued that the history we've been taught is not the accurate history of our country.
To the well-informed students of Black history, it should come as no surprise that a symposium that examines the concerted efforts to silence the voices of the descendants of enslaved Africans in the United States would be held in Cuba. From Langston Hughes to Nicholas Guillen, from W.E.B. Du Bois to Fernando Ortiz, from the Harlem Renaissance to the Afro-Cubano movement, African Americans have found kindred souls in Cuban writers, artists, and intellectuals. And we have come here because book banning in the United States, which disproportionately targets African Americans, has reached an epidemic level. But a few days before the plane carrying us landed at Havana's Jose Marti Airport, Dr. Mary Frances Berry, an academic, author, and civil rights activist who co-founded the Free South Africa movement that helped end apartheid and liberated Nelson Mandela from a South African jail, talked about book banning with DeWayne Wickham in her home in the Georgetown section of Washington, D.C.
We've titled our symposium, Banning Black Books, Silencing Black Voices, America's Apartheid. Do we make too much of a case here?
Well, no, we don't.
So when, as has happened, books like The Color Purple are banned, the autobiography of Malcolm X, the 1619 Project, when these books are banned, what do those banning efforts tell us about what people think about Black authors?
Well, the people who are doing the banning don't like what's in those books. If you think about it, they all have in common that they tell us about the horrendous conditions of abuse and exploitation that have occurred to Black people through racism, capitalism, and profit-making throughout our history.
Who's fighting back? Who's pushing back?
The people who are pushing back are their organizations of writers that are pushing back. There are some parents, but not enough people, in my opinion, are pushing back. When you don't want the 1619 Project, which is about all of the period of Black history. You just don't want people to know anything about what happened to Black people because it mentions oppression and slavery.
Good day, and welcome to Casa de las Americas. I'm Jackie Jones, Dean of the School of Global Journalism and Communication at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. It is my honor to be here in Havana to open this three-day symposium.
It was Morgan's Center for New Media and Strategic Initiatives, a unit within the historically Black university's journalism school that Dean Jackie Jones leads, which came up with the idea of bringing a symposium on the banning of books written by Black authors in the U.S. to Cuba. It was an idea that was embraced on the opening day by Abel Prieto and Dr. Miriam Nikado, two of Cuba's most important academics and intellectuals.
Nos enorgullece saber que Cuba.
We are proud that Cuba remains a meeting place for discussions of this caliber. And the University of Havana sees this as an opportunity to continue cultivating genuine academic relationships between Cuba and the United States, characterized by mutual respect and recognition. We have learned from each other's struggles, and each has found its own way in the relentless fight for justice and against all forms of discrimination, particularly discrimination based on skin color.
El editorial de la Casa de las Américas se publicaron at Casa de las Américas Publishing House essential works by Caribbean authors, by Afro-Brazilian authors, by Afro-Colombian authors were published. And in the year 1966, W.E.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folk. There are excerpts here from a speech by Malcolm X, a speech from the year 1965. And this magazine is from 1966. Two events in 1981 and 1984 were held here devoted to analyzing the cultures of Afro-American, Chicano, Puerto Rican, and Cuban communities, of course, Cuban communities living in the United States. These events were attended by representatives from these communities and scholars of these cultures. We could ask Minister Rapidio to help out with some paper and publish some of your books as an outcome of this symposium. I believe it could be important for this country. Culture is no doubt the best antidote to all this we are witnessing now, the banning, the exclusion, hatred for those who are different.
And it quickly became clear that any discussion of book banning between African Americans and Cubans of African descent would turn to the topic of cultural hegemony. The moderator of this session is Dr. Jason Johnson, a professor of journalism and political science in the School of Global Journalism and Communication at Morgan State University. The panelists are Dr. Ulexis Almeida, Dean of the Faculty of Sociology, History, and Philosophy at the University of Havana, and Dr. Molefe Kite Asante, Professor of Africology and African American Studies at Temple University, and Professor Extraordinarius at the University of South Africa.
We know that our general theme is about book banning, but there is so much intellectual and philosophical heft with both of these individuals that I have this sort of roundabout way that we're going to get to book banning that sort of highlights some of their brilliance before we get there.
Precisamente, yo desde mi posición.
And precisely me, from my position as a Black woman, activist, Afrofeminist, sociologist, professor, and also Cuban, who fights for the construction of a fairer, more inclusive society, obviously. The issue of cultural hegemony that implies the supremacy of a culture that imposes ways of living, that imposes a worldview, a philosophy that in some sense subordinates cultures and their values.
The banning of books is related to the burning of books. And both activities are about people who should be banned. Governments that ban books operate on fear, and what they cannot control by banning, they will try to destroy. What they fear is that people will read for themselves and make decisions based upon what they see as their best interest.
Part of why I wanted to begin the questioning with you, Dr. Almeida, is because the concepts that you teach are not the kinds of things that most people can discover on their own. They have to be read.
Within these devices that work in the schools, books constitute an important component because they are the vehicle through which that culture is transmitted. Therefore, it is understandable that from a hegemonic position, there are books that are subject to censorship, there are books that are prohibited.
Mass education is the surest way to mass consciousness. If you can prevent mass consciousness, you will be able to control the masses. However, if you do not control what it is that they read, you will have already lost part of the battle.
In one of the strategies, when we talk about hegemony, is precisely to erase, to annihilate all those role models because it contributes to demobilization. When you find entire populations, generations of young people who don't have them, who don't find role models, they're going to look elsewhere and follow other role models. And not having those role models within Black people is a danger.
When someone wants to hide truth, to conceal information, and to erase the record of misdeeds, they resort to announcing a ban on books and people. This is the fear of truth.
And fear of truth was the elephant in the room on the first day of the symposium, until the widely held belief in the United States that Cuba, a communist country of more than 11 million people with one of the world's highest literacy rates, bans books, was addressed.
There were times when our cultural politics was not faithful to Fidel's legacy, where homophobia prevailed. Attempts were made to implant socialist realism. At that time, there were banned books, and there was evident censorship. And there were some authors who were marginalized. People didn't talk about them, their works were not published, some terrible cases. With the creation of the Ministry of Culture and the appointment as minister of an intellectual very close to Fidel and deeply loyal to Jose Marti, Armando Hart, these errors were all definitely rectified.
In Fidel's thought, there are expressions that define an attitude and a policy. His words on April 6, 1961, "We do not tell people believe, we tell them read." He accompanied this with a reflection on the importance of humanity, appropriating the cultural wealth of humanity. He explained, "The revolution tells the people, learn to read and write, study, inform yourself, meditate, observe, think. Why? Because that is the path to truth."
Here's a little known truth. There were over 10,000 book bans in the United States during the 2023-2024 school year, and nearly half of them were banned in Florida, a state that its governor, Ron DeSantis, has proclaimed the Free State of Florida. In June 2021, the state of Florida banned its public schools from teaching any material from the 1619 Project, a Pulitzer Prize-winning book about the history of blacks in the United States. In explaining his state's action, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis said, "The purpose of our school system is to educate kids, not to indoctrinate kids."
The book is a 1619 project. Its creator, Nicole Hannah Jones. Nicole Hannah Jones, welcome. The 1619 project, in essence, is your flag.
Yeah.
The flag that you raised.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, Dwayne, because the stated reasons that the book has been banned is they say it's unpatriotic. But accidentally, this ended up being the most patriotic thing I've ever written, because by the end of the essay, I'm actually arguing that no one is more American than Black Americans, that we have built the country that everyone, like, you think about when you imagine American culture, you think about us. Fashion, language, music, film, literature, and yet we were made to feel we didn't have full rights of citizenship. And so my essay is actually arguing that because of that, we are the most American, we are the greatest democratizing force in the history of the United States. I think what is most critical to understand is ultimately the 1619 Project is a work of memory. What I mean by a work of memory is everything that happened in the book happened. So what we're calling history is actually memory. It's actually what people in power have decided they're going to teach us, who they're going to memorialize with their monuments, who they're going to name their schools after, who you're going to see when you go in a museum or art gallery, and what they're going to leave out. I've been writing about racism, racial inequality my entire career, more than 20 years. I was never attacked by presidents, by congressmen, by legislatures, by school boards, until I wrote about our national memory, until I wrote about history and argued that the history we've been taught is not the accurate history of our country.
At its root, the banning of books is about controlling the narrative, about erasing the memory of people and events that those in positions of power want to suppress. The 1619 Project is one example. The wreck of the Henrietta Marie is another. Banning black books, silencing black voices, now turns to a 300-year-old saga of tragedy, involving the millions of African people who crossed the ocean to the Western Hemisphere and worked until they died. I'm Randall Pinkston. I'm the Deputy Director of the Center for New Media at the School of Global Journalism and Communication at Morgan State University. And I am pleased to present Professor Michael Cotman. He's going to talk about being an author and a scuba diver and a researcher and a reporter. What Michael did with those skills was to produce a book, The Wreck of the Henrietta Marie. In 1699, the Henrietta Marie was one of many, many ships crossing the Atlantic with captive Africans. And in 1999, you published a book.
The Henrietta Marie had two slaving experiences carrying our people into slavery. One was 1698, one was 1699. It sank in 1700 off the coast of Key West, Florida. It is the only slave ship that we know of that's scientifically documented, where 20,000 artifacts have been recovered. The largest collection of slave ship shackles ever found on one site, 100 pair, including small shackles designed for children.
About a year ago, you discover that this book is being banned.
I received a call from a librarian in West Palm Beach, and she told me that your book has been withdrawn from the library in Florida. And so weeks later, I'm receiving other books in the mail from Fayetteville, North Carolina, from Wyoming, Cheyenne, Wyoming, from Alabama, saying my book is no longer accepted. They used the words again, withdrawn. So I thought about that when I'm thinking about deleted, my book's being withdrawn, my book's being rejected. That means that our history is being rejected. Our history is being withdrawn. Our history is being deleted. The book I used to read that my father gave me to read when I was a kid, James Baldwin. James Baldwin's books are banned in public libraries throughout this country. So the books that I read from James Baldwin as a kid, they can't read today.
And they can't read your book.
And they can't read my book. And I think back and say, well, what if those Baldwin books were banned? What if the books that my father was pulling off the bookshelf in those Detroit public libraries for me to read weren't there? I would not be here right now telling you this story.
Michael Cottman's story, like the works of so many other Black writers in the American hemisphere, is a form of literary resistance. Resistance that counters those who want to erase the memory of the enslavement of millions of people of African descent throughout this continent. From Buenos Aires to Boston, from Mexico City to Nova Scotia. This literary resistance peaked a century ago during the time of the Harlem Renaissance and the Afro-Cubano movement, two parallel social and cultural awakenings that strengthened the ties between Afro-Cubans and African Americans.
I was asked to speak on the Harlem Renaissance and its literary traditions.
Dr. Lisa Brock is a Cuba scholar, social justice activist, and a Kalamazoo College professor emeritus.
And so I'm going to say two things first. The book that the late Digna Castañeda and I wrote and published in 1998 called Between Race and Empire, African Americans and Cubans Before the Cuban Revolution. The book has an essay on baseball in terms of the Negro Leagues and Cubans who played in the Negro Leagues and African Americans or Black people that played in the Cuban Leagues. It has an essay on Chano Pozo and Dizzy Gillespie. It has many articles in here on our connections. The book has an essay on Nicholas Guillen and Langston Hughes. One of the interesting things about this essay, done by Keith Ellison, he says they both use the music of their people to create the cadences of their poetry. Guillen used song, and Langston Hughes used blues and jazz. They were so similar, but the trajectories of their lives ended differently. Guillen went on to become a celebrated poet of the Cuban Revolution, and Langston Hughes ended up being attacked with the McCarthy-era 1950 anti-communist tribunals. He was banned. It was very difficult for him to get work. He lost his income. His books weren't banned, but he was banned.
For Black people in the Americas, reconciling color and nation has always been problematic. And the specific history of each of our countries exposes with great diversity how problematic it has been to deal with this phenomenon that two intellectuals, the African-American William Du Bois and the Afro-Cuban Gustavo Urrutia, tried to synthesize into notions. For William Du Bois, it was the double consciousness, and for Gustavo Urrutia, it was the plus pain.
Zuleika Ramey, the former president of the Cuban Book Institute, is the director of Afro-American Studies at Casa de las Americas.
In the United States, Black people try to dialogue with the hegemonic culture by emphasizing their own values, Black values. In Cuba, there is a process of Africanization, so to speak, of the hegemonic culture, something that occurs with great force, especially in music. In the United States, during the Renaissance, Black men and women had a lot of protagonism, and we see all these women stand out. Nella Larsen, Jessie Fusette, Zora Neale Hurston. All of these women are here. Meanwhile, in Cuba, the phenomenon of Afro-Cubanism was fundamentally male.
I belong to the Afro-feminist articulation of Cuba. I'm one of the co-coordinators of that. And I have to tell you that we feel we have a big debt with the Cuban population. We have to do a lot more in terms of inclusiveness, and we have to do a lot more in terms of educating the younger generations of Cubans.
Dr. Kenya Serrano is Dean of the University of Havana's Faculty for Languages.
I have to say that Harlem means a lot for us, and the Harlem Renaissance movement. Harlem for Cubans is more than that. It's the Harlem that received Fidel in 1960. Harlem is the Tribune, the place where Fidel Castro was received when the United Nations decision makers didn't accept Fidel to be part of the official delegations. So it was Malcolm X and Harlem community. We have to give a new meaning to what Harlem means for Cuba and give a new meaning for what Harlem means for the Afro-American people, the people that is always at the first front line defending Cuba in the United States.
It seems to me that the greatest influence of Harlem's Renaissance was on the philosophical and ethical plane, more than on the literary one, because Black authors in Cuba were consolidated as a group and as an intellectual community a little later. And when one compares the text written by Alain Locke in 1925, which he called The New Negro, and the one that Urrutia first communicated orally in 1933 and later in writing in 1937, points of view of the New Negro, one realizes that they are talking about the same type of spiritual, psychological, and intellectual regeneration.
Hours later, a sense of renewal filled the air of the small dining room in Casa Mia, a privately owned restaurant that sits just a stone's throw away from the Malecón, Havana's famous waterfront boulevard. For a small group of symposium attendees, the evening was filled with talk of books banned, writers silenced, and the drinks that Ernest Hemingway made famous during the years he lived in Havana. But soon, the night quickly turned into morning as people gathered at the office of the National Union of Writers and Artists of Cuba for the symposium's final meeting, a conversation with Nancy Morrison, an Afro-Cuban poet and winner of Cuba's National Prize for Literature, who suffered a different kind of banning. In June 2023, after inviting Morrison to be its honorary president, organizers of the Paris Poetry Market stripped her of the prestigious international title. They did so at the urging of Jacobo Mochaber, a Cuban exile and strident critic of the island's communist government who left the country for France in 1963. In an open letter to the Paris Poetry Market, Mochaber said Morrison's crime is that she is an accomplice and active propagandist for her country's government, which to some might sound like an act of patriotism. Adele Newson-Horst, the chair of Morgan State University's Department of English and Language Arts, interviewed Morrison.
Good morning. I'd like to thank our Cuban hosts for a really wonderful time spent in beautiful Cuba. I'd like to briefly talk about Nancy's biography, her life's work.
It is Morrison's life's work that has earned her worldwide acclaim. Her work has been translated into more than a dozen languages, and her recordings of some of her best-known poems are archived at the United States Library of Congress. Last year, a day after her latest recording session at the Library of Congress, Morrison visited Morgan State University to share her poem about George Floyd with an audience at a school that the National Trust for Historic Preservation designated a national treasure.
Blues para George Floyd.
Blues for George Floyd. Rivers spring from your throat, flooding the morning clamor. 3 rivers under a blue moon, whose light scatters over your body, restless, denouncing the murderer in a police uniform. We are listing you awake with a war in the soul, with your crushed throat, already stiff, collapsed on top of that black tar, escorted by your rivers, carrying you on our shoulders under the skyscrapers, with your body singing blues while you speak to the rivers, loyal to your heritage. Forged at the base of the pyramids, we are lifting your body by now, invincible, made of bronze and gas and cold air. We are singing blues, blues sung by mothers and their songs, blues sung by daughters and their fathers, by boys and by girls with their grandmothers in silence, always guarding us blues, drawn by hundreds of cousins in the distance, wherever, subject to the dreadful air of the coming summer. Amidst your rivers flows a shower of spilled blood that is reborn in our over the black asphalt that claims justice like a nest.
Tenemos la certeza.
We are certain that the debates, the exchange that you had held during these days since last Thursday at our Casa de las Americas has contributed to strengthening already solid ties between African American writers and other creators and their Cuban colleagues.
I want to thank you all for coming. This has been a wonderful experience. I'm grateful to UNIAC and Casa de las Americas for providing the places to have these conversations about the issues we have discussed. We now have set before us the mandate to resist these challenges from those who seek to ban Black books and silence Black voices.
Power needs to control our memories because power then controls us.
Africans were never paid for 246 years of labor in the United States of America. The material wealth of the United States was based on the enslavement of African people. They don't want that in books.
I think the banning of books robs our children of their history and robs them of their dreams. It's up to us to continue to tell our stories, to make sure that these books that are banned get read.
We believe people should be encouraged to read books, and we believe the decision on which books they read should be left up to them.
To the work that we have to do. Thank you so much to Dean Emeritus DeWayne Wickham and the entire team for that production. For the rest of the evening, we have 3 things left. I'm from a PK, so I'll give you the layout so you'll know where we're going for the evening. PK means pastor's kid. We're going to have a panel discussion, and from there, we're going to have a short Q&A, and then we're going to have the ribbon cutting on the Wickham collection. I want to introduce the panelists in the order that they're going to come to the stage. Introducing first, DeWayne Wickham, the founding dean of the School of Global Journalism and Communication. Prior to coming to Morgan State University, he served as interim chair of the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at North Carolina A&T State University. He also served as a distinguished professor of journalism at Delaware State University. He's an Emmy Award-winning documentary filmmaker, and we're delighted to be celebrating him tonight. Dean Emeritus DeWayne Wickham. The conversation will be moderated by Errin Haines, the editor-at-large and founding mother at the 19th. She's also the author of the Amendment newsletter and host of the podcast named The Amendment. She is the elected president of the National Association of Black Journalists, Errin Haines. And rounding out this discussion, welcome home, Dr. Carla Hayden is an American librarian who served as the 14th Librarian of Congress. Dr. Hayden was both the first African American and the first woman to hold this post. Appointed in 2016, she was the first professional librarian to hold the post since 1974. And on July 7th, 2025, she was appointed Senior Fellow at the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. We welcome our panelists.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Dr. K. And I could not be more honored to be here with obviously what is the pride of Baltimore sitting on my right and my left, right? What a homecoming for you, Dean Wickham. What a reception here for you, Dr. Hayden, as well. And got to spend some time with your lovely mother. Hi, Mom. My new adopted family member for the night. Well, as Dr. K said, I'm Errin Haines, editor-at-large at the 19th, president of the National Association of Black Journalists, also president of the DeWayne Wickham Fan Club. I do not say that lightly. When Dean Wickham asked me to be here for this conversation tonight, the answer was an automatic yes. This is somebody whose career I have long admired and respected, and so it is my great honor to moderate this conversation, but between two people whose work I deeply respect and admire, and that really has defined access to knowledge and truth in America. So thank you both for that. Thank you both for your work. I'm excited to facilitate this conversation with the both of you. You are both bright lights for truth in the world. Let's get right to this conversation. I think, though, I want to start, what a powerful film on banned books, the importance of banned books. Dean Wickham, I wonder, just listening to Professor Cotman talking about where he might have been had he not had access to the books that he grew up with, your imagination unlocked on Pennsylvania and North in the Enoch Pratt Library, what would it have meant? Where would you have been if some of those books that you had access to growing up in that library, what if they had been banned? What if they'd been inaccessible to you as that second grade child?
Well, obviously I would not have made that film.
Yeah.
And would not have had the career that I've been fortunate enough to have. Let me begin by, first of all, thanking everyone who came out tonight. I appreciate your presence. This is a very important evening for me and my family, but also for Baltimore, and most importantly, I think, for Black journalists across this country who are striving to tell stories that are important and find it so difficult to get those stories told. And so, yes, I mean, obviously, if I had not had the opportunity that I was given to go to the children's reading room at the Enoch Pratt Free Library on the corner of Pennsylvania and North, sit at the feet of the librarian who would read to us, to excite my interest, I would not have become a reader. And, you know, having books read to me piqued my curiosity. It was my curiosity that drove me to reach out on my own
for books that opened even wider a world that has taken me to this place.
Absolutely. Dr. Hayden, I mean, I just think about this place. I mean, this is a sacred space that we are in. The access and the privilege, I mean, part of a healthy democracy is the existence of our libraries. Part of what it means to be in this country, to have access to knowledge, right? To not have that knowledge controlled or blocked by others. I wonder what you would have to add, what your thoughts were watching that film. We know the conversation around banned books is only intensified. Trying to silence voices like yours. We have to say, how do libraries continue to be on the front lines of defending access to knowledge, especially in times like these?
Well, I just want to say also, thank you to Enid Bradford Library in Baltimore for giving me a safe place and a place to really exemplify what librarians are saying right now. We even have bags and T-shirts, free people read freely.
Yes.
And on the wall of the building that is going to house, and we'll cut the ribbon shortly, the DeWayne Wickham room at the Enid Bradford Library, there's an inscription from Frederick Douglass. Once you learn to read, you'll be forever free.
That's right.
A Marylander, Baltimore person, and seeing that film, I want to get a copy too.
Hello.
About banned books. Alberto Menguel's book, The History of Reading, has a chapter. It talks about glasses, it does other, but that chapter, Forbidden Reading, has a photo of a woman who is in front of what looks like a slave cabin. She looks like a former slave, and she has a book, and he says, paraphrase, as centuries of dictators, slave owners, tyrants, and other illicit holders of power have always known, an illiterate crowd is the easiest to rule. Yes. And if you cannot prevent a people from learning to read, the next best recourse is to limit its scope. Yes. And that's what's happening now. Even more so. There have always been these attempts, but even now it's part of a larger effort.
Yes. Banning books, banning people, just as we heard in the film. Well, Dean Wickham, you started to kind of talk about this for a minute, but, you know, being here, looking out onto this crowd, being in this space, I know this is a full circle moment for you in so many ways, but to see your work, you got to see the Wickham collection, you got to preview it as we are about to see ourselves in a few minutes, to see your work and your archives and your legacy housed here in the Enoch Pratt Free Library. I just have to ask, how are you feeling in this moment? What does this mean to you personally?
This is, it's surreal. We talk about out-of-body experiences. Earlier in the evening, I had a chance to talk to some friends of mine with whom I caddied.
Wow.
You know, part of my progression through life, as I came out through Cherry Hill, I would go out to Woodhome Country Club to caddy. And we were talking half an hour or so about getting double bags, because caddying is the only profession that I know of where the harder the work, or the more money you make, the harder the work. So if you carry one bag, you're called a single caddy, you don't make as much. Carry two bags, you're a double caddy. And we're still talking about that. Because for me, as it was for some of my friends who caddied, it was a bridge that brought us from where we were to where we are now. And so to think about that, to think that I was caddying at age 12, and then until I was 17, 18 when I left to go into the military, to this point, and to think that that somehow was the bridge that brought me here. It's just amazing. I'm still pinching myself. I want to see that room again myself. I saw it for the first time in its fullness earlier today, and those who were with me will tell you I was speechless. And I know there's so much more we're going to do with it in terms of bringing it to life. The real challenge is for us, Dr. Hayden, is to bring it to life. To have, you know, I would say when I would go out on assignment sometime, and I remember when I was in Cuba, and we were having dinner with Fidel Castro, and it was an 8-hour dinner meeting, a lot of conversation, and I remember thinking to myself, if these walls could talk.
Yeah.
And I looked at that space that I've been so generously afforded, and I asked the question again, in a different way, will these walls be able to talk?
Absolutely.
They will.
Absolutely.
In fact, Vivian Fisher, and will we please give a hand for
Yes.
Vivian Fisher? Librarians dream about getting special collections, and I must admit, when we thought about a collection that would mean so much, we started courting Mr. Wickham. Actually, said, H.L. Mencken collection, that is still here and can be used. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And then Vivian brought it home. And just now, we were talking about, Vivian, are you going to digitize all those tapes? What's going to happen? It'll come alive.
I truly believe that. And I mean, obviously, you all saw in the film, I can tell you from personal experience, this man is still telling stories. That is going to be a place and a space that is still telling stories, not just your story, but the story of such a career, so many things that you got to have a front row to history to witness, and for people who could be introduced to our craft, how many people, I mean, it's just, it will be a place of inspiration and imagination, just as that little boy was inspired in a place like this not that long ago. Now, Dr. Hayden, we also have to give you credit, though, because this was your idea. You knew that this was a place and a space that needed to exist. And you even seeing, just hearing what you were saying now about this being a living, breathing space that people can come there meant to encounter this place, right?
And to get inspiration. The fact
Yes.
that you are from Baltimore. And so here's a role model that was mentioned in the film. Having role models, people to look up to.
That's it.
Also, the fact that, that you're real. And that the connection to Morgan State, so people want to do that. All of this is what you want a young person that comes in and they can see different ways. You're hearing the House of Anthony, and then you can go into the DeWayne Wickham collection, and you can listen soon to those tapes that only you did with how many presidents? Tell them about those tapes.
Well, I have 2 presidents, but I have in my work to write the Bill Clinton book, somewhere close to 100 interviews, on average about 90 minutes long each. With a vast array of people. If you can imagine all of the prominent people that era, most of his cabinet members, many of his prominent critics in the black community. Lani Guinea, I have a tape of an interview with her.
Oh, wow.
She was a friend before she wasn't, as they say in the politics. But so many people. I talk about George Wallace as a tape that I have. We have Albert Hani, I think his name is, an ANC leader who was one of the leaders of the military wing of the ANC while Nelson Mandela was in jail, came to Washington. And we had a press conference and I attended and I taped that exchange. And a few days later, he was assassinated in South Africa. So his voice was still, but I have some of his voice on tape. So there's a lot of that that we have. But in addition to those pieces, I wrote a column for USA Today for 30 years. And in those 30 years, I wrote probably 2,500 columns or more. And all of those columns are in that collection. And they range from columns about drug dealers who were buried with $100 bills between their fingers in a Cadillac. That's so E.R. Shipp probably knows that story better than I do. But also meetings with leaders. I met with every black mayor of a major city between 1987 and when I left work as a columnist in 2015. So I remember when your mayor in Atlanta was about to be indicted.
Bill Campbell.
Bill Campbell was about to be indicted. He called me the night before. and he said to me, "Hey, man, I'm about to be indicted. What should I do?" Now, this is too much of a story, Dr. Hayden, but I'll tell it very briefly. Bill Campbell was a lawyer. He was the mayor, but he was a lawyer. I've got a lawyer calling me the night before he's to be indicted by the federal government, asking me, what should I do? I've been a columnist long enough to know we were not the only ones on the line. And I simply said, man, whatever you do, do not lie.
I love that. I hope that's on tape because I'm interested as a native Atlantan. No, but I mean, what you're saying, Dr. Hayden, about the importance of representation, hearing you tell these amazing stories for people, young people, to be able to come here and know that somebody from their community got to go in all those places and spaces to tell all of these stories about the totality of the Black American story as part of the American story, right? You are a Black journalist covering American history, and you are from this very city, a neighborhood just like theirs. Like, what could that, what that could mean to them? It feels immeasurable. It really feels immeasurable.
And to listen to you interview Nelson Mandela and
global impact. Global impact.
Just think, and they can sit and listen to those. I'm going to digitize it. Say, so we. I don't know.
We.
Yeah, but so that they can hear his voice, hear your voice, know that they're in a library that helped you get to the point.
That's right. That's right. That same journey that started here for you can be a journey that starts for so many of them. Well, listen, I see that you've got a book in your lap there, Dr. Hayden. And I don't know if you brought that with you, if you just grabbed it here on your way up to the stage. You brought it, and you're going to take it out. Yeah, you're not leaving that behind.
It's Ida B. Wells.
Well, tell us about why you brought it. Yeah, talk to us about this.
As a journalist, and a journalist who really brought the world's attention to lynching. And there's a saying that you had, hold the world or tell the world the facts. And that's what you did.
Yes. Yes, I love that you brought that book. I love Crusade for Justice. Definitely recommend as well. One of my favorite Ida B. quotes, too, is also, the people must know before they can act. And there is no greater education or educator to compare with the press. So I believe that you have educated so many millions of readers over the years, and people will be educated by having access to the millions of words that they can read and hear and touch and have access to that are going to be in this collection. And, in this, I just think about that in this age of erasure and exclusion, in this age of banning, where, frankly, as journalists, we do have to wonder, are our words safe to live on, right? You have a byline, you think those words are going to be available forever. That's not a guarantee. Documentaries like that remind us that it's not a guarantee. And so for there to be a permanent place for your words to be living feels deeply important in this moment. You mentioned the role of journalists, particularly Black journalists, and the challenge that we face right now. There's a banning that's going on with us too, right? The truth itself is often under attack in this age of erasure and exclusion. So Dean Wickham, I just really want to asking for me, what is your message about how you keep faith in the mission when the public's trust in media can feel shaken? And what do you say about why Black journalists matter now?
Yeah. Well, two things. First of all, I believe that we have seen this before. We've passed this way before. In the history of America, this is not new. I mean, this is as old as the nation. I'm talking about efforts to silence the press on one side, efforts to silence speakers on the other side. In the 1790s when John Adams was president, he pushed through both the Alien and Sedition Acts and made it illegal, actually, for people to raise their voice in opposition to the government. Gave him great opportunity without any second guessing on the part of the legal community to deport people with whom he disagreed. And so we saw that then, we saw it tragically here in Baltimore, Dr. Hayden, in the Civil War when Abraham Lincoln used Fort McHenry as a prison. He imprisoned most of the editors and many of the journalists in Baltimore because they were pro secession journalist. He imprisoned even the nephew of Francis Scott Key. So that was a crisis that we saw and we met and we overcame it. We overcame it in every instance, and I can give you many other examples. I won't coming forward with courageous journalism. And we have to find journalists with courage to take on the assignment.
Yes.
Today, there's too much repeating and not enough reporting being done by journalists. We need to talk to our young people as they come through the university and challenge them to take up the charge, to go out and be courageous enough to tell the truth. As Les Payne, my dear friend, two-time Pulitzer Prize winner, who's now passed, used to say, tell the truth and duck, but tell the truth. And so that's the real challenge, and I think we're doing that under Errin's leadership and NABJ, with new programs all the time that are pushing the edge in terms of training our journalists. The great challenge soon will be to figure out how we answer the question, what is news? You know, we think we know, but we really only know for the moment. Every time, I said we've been there before, every time a means of communication develops and is offered to the American public, the way we do journalism has changed.
That's right, but we know that the truth still matters, and right now, the value of truth as its own currency, I think it is becoming more valuable than ever. You've already mentioned digitization and how important that's going to be for this collection, for people who want to know how to practice the craft of journalism. That collection is going to be a masterclass for folks who want to learn and who want to know that. So digitization is something that I'm certainly committed to making a reality as president of NABJ, and also making sure that our members know that this collection exists and that they have access to it. I know that you are also somebody that's concerned about what it means to have trusted messengers in this moment, and also the role of Black journalists in being those trusted messengers.
A trusted source, and that's what libraries have been, and librarians.
Yes.
And you know that they're not in it for the money. You know, they are the ones that you can really trust in helping people to determine what is a trusted source of your information. Where is this coming from? And that's so important. And just being able to see, for instance, your notebooks.
Yes.
All the research you do. Those notebooks are there, so they see that you did a lot of research, you checked your sources, you did that. That's going to be important for them to see.
Yes,
show. If I could add one other thing along that line, I think it's really important at universities accept the challenge of teaching information literacy. Information, you know, we need to be able to really cut through all of the haze that is out there, come to some clear understanding of what is good information and what is bad information. We need information literacy. It ought to be taught, by the way, Dean Jones. I'm telling Dean Jones what she already knows. It ought to be taught not just in journalism programs. It ought to be taught university-wide, because everybody is a consumer of news and information, and it is news and information that they get that they make most of their decisions from. So teaching information literacy ought to be the first order of education in higher education.
And high school.
I was going to say, and even younger, as somebody who grew up watching the local news at the dinner table, very important.
They're starting to look at TikTok and do this and
That's where they're getting their news.
That's where they're getting their news.
That's where they're getting information, not all of it good information, by the way. Dean Jones, I'm glad to know that Dean Wickham is not just my unofficial assignment editor. Listen, I want to give you all a chance to ask some questions of our esteemed panelists, so get your questions ready. Somebody is going to come around with a microphone to take your questions. Emphasis on the word questions, but before we do that, as you all get your questions together, I just want to ask both of you to reflect on legacy, because that is so much of what tonight is about, but a living, breathing legacy again. When future generations walk into this library, when they discover the Wickham collection, what do each of you hope that they will learn about journalism, about democracy and about the power of access.
Well, I have to say too, that they're going to walk to get to the collection. They're going to have to go into the Eddie and Sylvia Brown African American room in the Juanita Burns collection. So they're going to, like, who are these people?
Yes.
And they're going to want to know about that. And that's that curiosity.
Yes.
And that's what it's about. That they're
That's
going to
part.
be curious, and if the names are there, what's going to happen? The fact that they can see the artist, Chris Wilson, I believe, who was Baltimore, and not the Lords of Baltimore. Don't worry, they're in Annapolis. For those of you who remember they were here. So you're starting with that, and that journalism is that why, how,
That's right.
that curiosity. So that's what's going to happen. They're going to say, wow, and here's someone from my city that got to find out why and how and tell the truth.
I think it should be said and repeated because Nicole Hannah-Jones said it first in the film. History is about memory, you know, and so to the extent that I can offer some nuggets of history of the times in which I lived, it's also about offering people hopefully a clear and concise memory of those times. It's very important that obviously we'll have sources of information will come to us from many ways. I hope that people will see that the Pratt has done what so many people have not done and what some politicians are trying to undo, and that is the voice of Black journalists.
That's right. That's right. Well, with that, we want to open it up to questions to you all. Do we have questions in the audience? We have time for a couple. Okay. Okay, we've got microphones on both sides. Microphones coming over here first. Over here first. Okay. Hi.
What I've noticed in the meeting.
Okay, thank you for this program this evening. I wish it was available where people may not have been able to come this evening could see it. But my question is, have you received much pushback in terms of on the books, like especially African American books? And if so, or if it were to come to you, how? And I don't know if you're at liberty to say, but how would you address it?
With the collection maybe coming under threat under the current political environment, is that your question?
Basically, like I said, in terms of the ban on books,
Can you speak to that,
the
Dr. Hayden?
library been affected by that? And if you have, or if you see that coming down the road, how do you think would be the best way to address it?
Well, the Pratt Library is in a very fortunate position that there's support for freedom to read, and that's been a legacy. And there is a process. If you don't like a book or you don't want your child to read it, you have an opportunity to not have your child read it, but you don't have the right to restrict other people's children from reading. And so that's kind of right. It does, though, it depends, though, now in terms of where you live. And Florida was mentioned, and I'm so glad that that was brought up. So different states, librarians are under attack in different states. They have death threats for producing the books or making the books available. So it does depend on where you live now. And so fighting back is having the librarians from Maryland and from Pratt that join with the librarians from Florida, and we're doing some things. They call us Feisty Fighters for Freedom. So we're banding together, and it makes a difference to have board members, library board members that can uphold things and go to those city and county meetings and speak up, just like the people who want to ban books. They go to a lot of meetings. They do. And so there should be some people there that say, no, I want my child to be able to read. I know why the Cage Bird sings.
Strength in numbers, so important in this moment for so many of our institutions, right? I think we had a question on this side of the room.
concerned today about the fact that our media is being so filtered. I look at more of YouTube and different corporate news media because we're not hearing about what's going on in the collapse right now because of African ownership of so where do we go to get real news about the world that's not being used as propaganda, that's not telling us about events that are talking about the paradigm shift in power that's going on globally? We have BRICS coming on the scene. Nations are because only one non-white nation has a vote in the Security Council of the United Nations. You're making decisions for the entire world.
Right.
So where do we go to here?
Well, Dean Wickham, I know you have a robust, global, diverse news diet. So I know that this is a great question for you to
I think the challenge, listen, first of all, the answer is not easy. The challenge is for you to become a critical consumer of media. You have to search for media like you shop for clothes. You've got to go, if you don't find it at one store, you have to go to the next store. Ultimately, the answer will lie in our ability to do our own news reporting, research, and reporting. We talk at Morgan and our Center for the New Media and Strategic Initiatives about new ways to communicate. And we're playing with ideas, challenging ourselves and trying to find financial supporters to help us build new communication methods. Let me give you an example. If you lived in the Park Heights community, we wouldn't ask to create a new newspaper in Park Heights because we know every time they create new newspapers, they become old newspapers. The Baltimore Banner, it's a good newspaper, but it's an old newspaper, meaning it's doing basically what the Sun did, it's just doing it online. We need to look for ways to communicate in cities and in portions of cities. If we take Park Heights, as I said, for example, we can target using new communication methods and be able to deliver news content to you on your smartphone or your watch using different methods of identification of where you are. You know, if you walk into some stores, your phone will start telling you what's going on, what sales are there. And we can use that same technology to deliver news into target areas. Geo-fencing. We can fence those communities off strategically, electronically, and then deliver news. It's a relatively inexpensive means of delivering news content to people. So we have to look for new ways. Every time, as I said before, every time means of communications in this country change, delivery systems change. People talk about newspapers dying. Well, newspapers are dying, but the thirst for news is not.
Absolutely.
In fact, it's greater now than ever before.
That's absolutely right.
How do we answer it in our community? How do we get news and information out of the community and then transmit it back into the community to target it to people? Geofencing is one way to do it.
Absolutely. And listen, the media literacy piece that Dean Wickham was talking about, it matters. Somebody like you who is clearly quite news literate and is a consumer of news of all kinds, the people in your networks, they're going to trust what you tell them is worth trusting. Strength in numbers, again, people in your networks, share accurate news that you care about with the people in your networks. I know that there are so many of us who would never want to lie to our friends and neighbors, making sure that they're getting accurate information. Do that. It is just because somebody sees me on television or sees you doing an interview, they don't know us personally. They know all of you personally. So the news that you consume is the news that the people in your community can trust and the people in your networks can trust. So I just encourage that. Newsletters are also an emerging way. Signing up for newsletters where people are also not only sharing information, but sharing links to other news articles that they feel people in their network should read. So that also feels like a very important source of news. And I would just make a plug for my own newsroom, the 19th, which is free to consume, 19thnews.org. We cover the intersections of politics, gender, and power. So, first of all, I want to thank both of you for this robust conversation. I want to thank all of you out in the audience for being part of this celebration, but I know that I am the only thing standing between us and this ribbon cutting. So I am going to ask all of us to exit this room. We're going to go to the official ribbon cutting at the conclusion of this program to have the first look at the DeWayne Wickham Room and Collection. Thank you all so much.
Let's see if we can get them out first so they can.
Oh wait, watch your step here.
I just want to tell you.
There's some experiments that are already going. That's right. Because we got to get our connect one. Is that the card? First. Let me see if I can call public.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to talk to them.
Excuse me, Brother Kirk, can you tell them to turn this mic on?
Can we get them, take them in there first?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get the mic on.
Oh, this one back up here.
If we can hold on for just 1 second, one second, please, just for some instruction, because we do have a ribbon cutting, so we actually need to get Dean Emeritus Wickham, Dr. Carla Hayden, and Errin Haines in first, so we can cut the ribbon, along with the people that are in wheelchairs. So if we can hold on 1 second, pull back, and let's follow them to the ribbon cutting. Thank you so much. Just to help out, just to help out a little bit. All right, go ahead, sir. You can go ahead and go.
help with the kid. So,